This is Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Good. I'm excited today. We've got one of my favorite guests from one of my favorite technology companies, so can't wait to get into it.
Yeah. Today we've got a sponsor spotlight episode. These are the ones that we create with our friends in the industry to help us get some more detail around kind of what they're working on. A little bit of a departure from our normal vendor neutral, which we do every week, but this is where we actually get to ask questions about product and things like that. So I want to welcome back for the third time from Silverfort, Head Kvetz. He's the CEO and co-founder at Silverfort. So welcome back to the show, Head.
Hey, Jeff. Hey, Jim. Great to be here.
Yeah. The last time we chatted was at Gartner. And if you recall, Jim was in his like Vegas or maybe like Western dealer outfit when we were chatting there up in your suite. So
Yeah,
what have you been?
But today, I was expecting something,
Sorry, this is all I could do for
Very
today
normal.
was a golf shirt. Yeah.
You look very normal.
Normal in quotation marks. So what have you been up to for the last few months, Head, since we last chatted in December?
Been very busy. I mean, first of all, the identity market in general is really moving super fast now, and there's so much going on. And in Silverfort specifically, there's just a lot of growing very fast. We now have more than 1,000 customers, which is a milestone for us. We acquired a company called Resume. Just told you about it, last time. It was right after, but since then we've kind of integrated the teams and the platforms together and already started offering it to our customers. So that has been strategic for us. We released new products. We grew the team. We hired a new president and chief revenue to lead our go-to-market. So yeah, a lot going on in a few months. I like it. I like the speed.
And hey, we just got back from the Identiverse conference. A couple observations. One is that this community is stronger than ever. The second thing is like how much this identity security space is evolving. You've got such a focus on NHI. They had an NHI pavilion, which Silverport played a part of. You've got the shared signals framework really taking center stage. You've got AI agents as a major talking point. What do you see with all this starting to come together and evolving? It's really changing from single sign-on, privileged access management, and identity governance, right? Taking on a much bigger picture.
Yeah, I agree. So in general, the identity market is evolving. And I think that, what we started to see last year, I think is only progressing, which is, the kind of identity security category forming and becoming its own thing as opposed to a lot of features and point solutions. So I think what we're starting to see is all these things, like non-human identity security, and identity threat detection and response, and identity security posture management, and all these these buzzwords the different startups have been doing are starting to converge and starting to become something broader and work together and really kind of collaborate and integrate between them. And I think that's what organizations need. Not a million different products, but something that really treats the problem holistically. So definitely happening. I mean, we are obviously pushing in that direction and really kind of going for a platform play, but we're not the only ones. A lot of people are talking about that. And I think that all these smaller categories like non-human identity security is an example of actually contributing to that, because those are the things that kind of create the momentum for a bigger platform to be created. That's exactly what happened in the early days of cloud security or endpoint security. All these smaller things that eventually created enough critical mass for a platform.
I get the feeling that there's like this assumption that people at this point have solved for, basic identity governance, basic privileged access management, single sign-on, MFA, right? They've kind of centralized and maybe gotten the basics in place, which I struggle with because I'm not always sure if that's the case. I see a lot of companies out there that still don't have an IGA. They still don't have really privileged access management. I guess, is that a fair, and I don't want to call it a criticism, but you think that's a fair observation of, okay, we're assuming you've got these basic things in place, and now we're starting to get into sort of the next gen of identity security. And that might be things like, AI and NHI and shared signals framework and CAPE and like a whole bunch of other acronyms, right? That assume maybe you've got some of that stuff in place. Is that fair?
I think that you're actually very right about the fact that a lot of people don't have those basics figured out. And I think that what is happening now is not necessarily some kind of a next layer that assumes that you already have the layer before that. I think that in many ways, what is happening now is companies are realizing that they haven't made enough progress with the old approach. They haven't been able to solve the problem. And part of this new approach that we're seeing is also trying to go back to these things and address them in a new, maybe simpler way. Because I think what has been true for identity for many years is identity is very complex. Anything that you do in identity, any identity project is years and tons of resources. And some of the very large organizations have been able to do it with huge investments and headcounts. But many companies haven't. They got stuck. And I think that what's happening now with all this innovation in the market is not only offering you the next things, but also revisiting some of these problems and saying, hey, maybe there's a better way to do it. Maybe there's a more automated, scalable, easy to implement way to address them. So I think you're completely correct about a lot of companies don't even have those basics figured out. So we can't afford to just move on. We have to take care of them.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that I'm going to hear you said I was right. So that's all I took away from that answer. So you guys have recently expanded in, from, I guess, like the on-prem identity to including now non-human or NHIs, which, as Jim mentioned, was sort of the buzz around the recent Identiverse conference. Why do you think that is? I mean, it's not like NHIs are new, at least from my perspective. We've had service accounts and other non-human identities for a long time. And I'm just curious as to why do you think this is getting so hot right now?
I think it has been a problem for a long time. I don't think it's a new problem. You're right. Service accounts specifically have been a problem for decades. Some of the newer types of NHIs are newer, obviously, maybe the ones who are in the cloud and SaaS applications and things like that. So they are obviously newer. But the fact that everybody's talking about it right now is, a combination of the fact that it is a big problem and it is a big risk that people need to address, and the fact that a lot of vendors are investing money and raising money around it. So that feeds some of the hype. I think that's actually a good thing because I think that the startup ecosystem and the innovation that it brings with it is actually a great way to fuel this revolution that we're seeing across the identity industry. It's not just non-human identities. Last year it was all about ITDR, right? And I'm assuming next year it will be all about security for agentic AI. And all of these things, separately, they look like trends that come and go. But all together, they create this wave of, priority and investment in identity security in a new generation of identity security products. And if you look at the early days of other security segments, I mentioned cloud security, that's what happened, right? It started with people, building companies to do container security or cloud security posture management or other specific things that eventually created enough pieces to combine into an overall cloud security platform. And I think that's what we're seeing in identities is all these waves and all these trends they seem to kind of come and go or have this kind of hype cycle, but all together they're creating the bigger wave of just overall awareness to identity security and new approach of addressing it. I think specifically that NHI is a big problem. It's not just a trend. It is a big problem. People spend so many years trying to protect their human users with multi-factor authentication and privilege access management, and they have neglected the non-human identities, and those non-human identities are now targeted in the majority of data breaches. So it is a very true, risk and something that needs to be addressed. I think it will also grow now with AI. So AI agents are also increasing that problem because they're taking a bigger and bigger role in organizations, and it probably will continue to grow. So overall, this is a very growing problem that has no good solution. So I get why this is a priority.
So let's talk a little bit about that recent expansion you guys did into that whole NHI space. I'm going to put my very well worn on, jaded, CISO hat. There's so many products in this space. So what makes Silverfort different when it comes to how you guys are approaching, that type of identity security, specifically for these NHIs or maybe cloud identities?
So first of all, we announced an expansion in that area, but we've been doing a non-human identity security for several years now. From before it was cool, and we just started from what was the priority. I think it still is the priority in many cases, but it was definitely the older problem, which is service accounts. So Active Directory service accounts. That's where we started, maybe 5 years. And with AD service accounts, I think we've built by far the best solution in the market. I say it very comfortably because I think that, we've really done some massive innovation there that no one else has been able to do so far. So not only we are able to discover all these service accounts, even the ones that are not documented, the ones you don't even know about, because we look at their behavior. We can see that it's behaving like a machine, not like a human. So we find even unofficial ones, ones that, maybe some person is using their personal account to run some application or script. We'll even find that. So not only the documented one. Then we also show you what they're doing. So we show you that this service account is being used from these sources to these destinations with these protocols. We give you the full mapping of the dependencies. Where is it actually being used? That has been a huge problem for years. People couldn't protect these accounts because they were worried if they make any small change to them, something will break. Who knows which other applications have been using this account, and if I even change the password once, something will break. We map all these dependencies. You have full visibility to them. And then the most powerful piece is we have a way to actually enforce a policy. We can protect them inline. And that is probably the biggest differentiator of Silverfort in general and specifically for non-human identities. Not only we show you what they're doing and offer some offline kind of, risk mitigations you can do, but also we can control what they do inline. So if we see a service account being used outside of where it's normally used or where it needs to be used, we can, kind of block anything else, or tell you if anything else is happening. So if we see that this account is used to connect from A to B every day, any attempt to use it anywhere else or to anywhere else, we can alert on, or we can even block in real time. So make it impossible to abuse this account. And this really reduces the risk of those accounts because it means that even if you steal the password, you can only go from A to B. You can't cause damage. And then that is what we've done for a few years very successfully. Hundreds of enterprises are using it. Some of the biggest companies in the world. I think we'll probably have. I think we have the most advanced product for that. What is the newer addition is that we expanded that to all the cloud environments, and that is thanks to our acquisition of Resonate. So Resonate had those connectors and analytics around all the different cloud environments. And we've now fully added that into our platform. We really merged the product. It took us a few months. I think we did it relatively fast. So we completely really combined the product. Now we can protect non-human identities anywhere, not only in AD, but also in all the major cloud identity providers like Okta and Entra, and all the cloud infrastructure providers like, AWS and Azure and GCP, and also all the major SaaS applications. So even if you have SaaS applications that you use, with local identities, we'll even see and protect that. So now it's a really end-to-end offering, and I think it's probably the broadest offering in this market. And also, as opposed to some of the younger startups, we have a much bigger customer base. So we have, many large organizations using it at scale. So I think, overall, with the traction and maturity that we have, and with the fact that we have this inline active enforcement model, I think that we have a lot of advantages in this space. And then I think the next thing that is going to be important, and we're all over it, is how do you protect the identities of AI agents, which are non-human identities, but I think it's a new type. It's a completely new type of energize, not like the regular energize.
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about AI because we can't go for an episode of the Identity Center podcast without getting into AI at this point. I want to ask you real quick though about the ITDR space itself. When we first met, that was kind of like, oh, okay, this is the area you're playing in. How is ITDR fitting into this? Because, Jim and I just got back from the Identiverse conference, and there really wasn't a lot of mention of ITDR specifically. And I'm curious to see if that term has evolved, or are we moving now into, is it just identity security? Like, where do you see ITDR fitting into this?
It's a great question. I think that what is happening to ITDR, and what I think will also happen to these other subcategories of identity security, including NHI, is they're emerging and they're getting some maturity, and then they're being at some point kind of consolidated or merged into bigger identity security offerings. So, IPDR, there were a lot of startups doing it, and a lot of enterprises started, even looking for that. And then a lot of these startups got acquired, right? And were kind of merged into bigger identity offerings or identity security offerings, until the point where it's almost a feature now in broader platforms. By the way, two types of platforms where you see it kind of merge now. One is into broader identity security platforms like ours, and second is into XDR solutions that are not really identity specific, but they do detection and response in general, right? So a lot of the companies that are just focused on detection and response, now ITDR is one pillar of that. So, you can really think about it as either a feature of a bigger identity security platform or as a feature of a bigger XDR platform. But it's no longer a standalone thing. And that makes a lot of sense. Who wants so many different products? I think the same will eventually happen to NHI security. I don't think that in 2 years from now, people will buy NHI security from companies that only do that. So I think that it makes a lot of sense that these things are kind of created and developed and kind of, getting innovation from the startup ecosystem. But then once they really kind of figure it out, they become part of bigger platforms. Very similar to what happened to UEBA in the past, if you remember. There used to be a lot of products doing user behavioral analytics, and today it's just a feature of every security platform.
Yeah, good point on UEBA. I actually wanted to bring you back to that service account discussion. This ITDR thing is so fascinating, but I think the service account everyone can relate to it. You guys put out a new report. Let me get the name right. Insecurity in the Shadows, new data on hidden risks of non-human identities. There are a couple statistics in there, but one that really jumped out at me was that 80% of organizations can't stop the misuse of service accounts in real time. I think 20% are out to lunch, maybe don't even know that there are service accounts. this is a really hard thing to do. I mean, you mentioned it where you have these service accounts, and for some organizations, they're the kind of the outlier accounts that were created in 2006 and nobody who was around then works here anymore kind of thing, where you have these really oddball service accounts. But even when you have good control of your service accounts, to know that they're being misused, one requires that you need to understand what the proper use is. But then you need a mechanism to stop that account from taking action if it's being misused. So you kind of spoke to that. Like, what is the mechanism to make all that work from a Silverpoint perspective?
First of all, you're right. I think those 80% is probably really 100%. Maybe the others are our customers, but other than that, I really think it's a problem that I don't see people solving it on their own. And we have built, I think, a very innovative technology for addressing this. And also, not only we have technology, but we really thought about the full journey of doing it. So I'll start just from the technology, then I'll explain what we had to figure out in the journey to help customers really leverage this effectively. The technology piece is, we figured out that it's not enough to just give you visibility to these accounts. I mean, that's a good starting point, and that's what a lot of the vendors are doing now, but I don't think that solves the problem on its own. So, reading information from the directory is just the starting point. We had to figure out, how do you then enforce controls? How do you basically intervene in what these accounts can do? And that really requires an inline technology. So at the heart of the Silverfort platform, there's a technology that we call RAP, Runtime Access Protection, that plugs into the directory, okay, for example, Active Directory, but also others, in a way that doesn't just give us visibility, it gives us the ability to intervene inline in the actual decisions of the directory. So for example, if you're trying to access some system, could be a modern system, could be a legacy system, and we see that request coming in to the directory, we are able to then not only see it and log it and analyze it, but we are also able to potentially block it, or to potentially hold it and do something about it, like verify it somehow, and only then allow it. So we can really become a decision point in the middle. And we found a very elegant way to do it without causing, any issues to the network or to the performance. That appeals kind of a lot of the secret sauce of Silverfort and what gives us advantage in many areas, but also applies to service accounts. Because with this, we can not just give you visibility, but we can actually prevent any abuse of these accounts. So now, moving to the journey of how customers actually adopt it, I talked about discovery, right? That's something we do automatically. So we find those accounts based on group memberships and naming conventions, and most interestingly, what they do. Then we map where they're being used. That's another thing we do automatically. But then it gets to the enforcement piece. And to do the enforcement at scale, right? Think about it. Some of these companies have 1 million service accounts. Okay, that actually exists, right? Like huge amount.
Right, you're not exaggerating there.
No, some companies have 1 million services. How do you even start protecting them? So it has to be something automated. It has to be something that is really built into the processes of the organization, of the IT, that don't require manual work. So we figured that if we learn what each of these service accounts are doing at scale, right, even for 1 million service accounts, and we automatically figure out how predictable is it, can we see after a month, after 2 months, that it really has some baseline. It goes from these 2 systems to these 5 systems every day. This is what it's doing. And most of these accounts, this is kind of how they behave. We can build a mapping for each one of these millions accounts. We can automatically build this map, this baseline, and also understand how sure are we? Is it very predictable and repetitive? And then we can automatically start moving them into enforcement, into protection, where we only allow that. So if an account is very predictable, very doing the same thing every day, we'll move it very quickly to enforcement, and we know that it's not going to do anything wrong. If it's not, then it will take a little longer, but all of it can happen automatically. And we built integration to the existing IT systems that organizations are using, like ServiceNow, so that we can build it into the regular processes. So if they're working with something like ServiceNow, we can automatically plug into that and populate our policies based on, the CMDB, or based on, tickets that people are opening. We can avoid you having to build any policy manually. All of that took a long time. The just building of the capability, that was one piece, but getting it really to the point where it fits the way enterprises work at scale, that took a long time and a lot of work. And I think that gives us a big advantage, because we can really do that at this huge scale, because we understand what people need in order to be able to do that at this large scale.
Absolutely. Your point is really well taken when it comes to the scale. I talk to a lot of clients who are getting into their IAM roadmap, and they need to take some time in the beginning to clean up their Active Directory. Active Directory is usually the core platform from a security standpoint that runs most organizations. Their email's tied to it. The ability to log on to the network and communicate with your coworkers, just so many functions are reliant on Active Directory. So they have to do this cleanup project, which usually includes group cleanup, group identification. What are those groups doing? And service account cleanup. Yeah. First off, I asked you to build a tool for the group cleanup. Second off, when it comes to the Active Directory cleanup, the service account cleanup, you mentioned this mapping that needs to take place. I mean, that's a big part of that exercise, that when you're doing it with spreadsheets and emails to, try to track down the person who knows what that account does, it's just not the right approach. Second off, it takes forever, especially when you have hundreds of thousands or a million service accounts. So how long does that mapping exercise take with Silverfort tool?
Finding most of the service accounts and what they're doing, within 2 weeks, you get almost a full picture. Okay, so within 2 weeks, it's enough for us to figure out, it's enough time to understand if an account is behaving like a human or not, usually, unless the person is on vacation, right? But for most cases, it's also enough time to understand, for these accounts that are more active, what are they doing? Now, that's maybe 95% of your account. Then there's a long tail of accounts that only run a scheduled task once every month. And it will take that long to notice them and find what they're doing. But that's that last 5%, that can take a little while, and that's okay. As long as you can start somewhere and you can mitigate the majority of your risk, that's okay that will take a little extra time. That is a far faster and more complete approach than, what you're describing, which is how organizations try to do it until now, trying to manually figure out what these accounts are doing. That's not a scalable approach. Any company who's tried to do that, maybe they were able to do that for 100 service accounts, right? Like ridiculous numbers, right? Like companies tell us, we managed to do this for 50 service accounts. We know exactly what they're doing, but they have 20,000, right? So it's almost symbolic. And also with the manual approach, you'll never know if you really have the full picture. So, you went through this, you talked to the application owner, they think that it's being used by these 5 servers. They don't really know. I mean, they think that this is where it's being used. I mean, who knows if this account is also reused for another system? Nobody knows for sure. So at the end of the day, what happens is people end up with these Excel sheets a year to build, and they're still not fully sure that this is the full story. So they don't want to act on it. They don't want to actually make changes to the system because they're not fully certain that it's not going to break something. And if they try and it did break something, then the project is completely derailed because now nobody's going to allow them to do anything. And this happens all the time. So with Silverfort, not only we shorten it and simplifies it, but also we give you the comfort that this is everything this account is doing. This is the full picture. It's impossible that this account is doing anything that we don't see, because we see all the authentications. That's kind of the heart of our technology. So you know that if you're going to now make a change to this system, these are the only 3 places where you need to do it. And you know exactly what will be affected. And you don't even necessarily have to do that, because we can also reduce the risk for you, using our virtual fencing, by just, preventing this account from being used anywhere else. That alone is a huge reduction of risk, because it means that nobody can use this account for lateral movement now or to spread ransomware. It can only log in from A to B. So it's just a very easy, very streamlined way to reduce that risk. And again, this is Active Directory, where I think the pain is, by the way, the biggest. But now we can protect also all the cloud environments. It's really that end-to-end approach where you don't need to solve these problems individually, but you get one platform where you can do that. And the other advantage is non-human identities is only one element of your identity risk. Attackers don't only target non-human identities, they also target human identities, and they might start from an NHI and then expand to a human account. So any approach that only looks at one piece of this puzzle is missing some context. If you only look at non-human identities, or if you only look at privileged users, or if you only look at the cloud, or only look at AD, any one of these siloed approaches is missing context and is not going to really be able to give you the full story, because attackers don't look at it like this. Attackers look at all of this as one big attack surface.
Yeah, attackers don't care whether you're human or non-human. They're going to exploit whatever they can. Yeah. That fear of breaking things is so important to understand, because that is like the number one reason I've found that people don't do anything to solve some of their servers account issues, or CI/CD pipeline, or whatever it may be. How do you establish that trust to say, okay, we think we've got a pretty good handle on what the mapping looks like between, if I shut down this account, whether it's AD or a cloud account or whatever it may be, that I feel confident to understand what the ripple effect might look like for some of the other downstream things. How do you establish that trust? Because let's be honest, system admins and other folks are like, don't touch it. It's working. Yeah. And how do you get past that fear?
That's a great question. We didn't fully understand how big that fear is initially, and it took us time to learn how to offer things that will make people comfortable. And one of those things that was very effective is to move these accounts, before we move them into full enforcement and prevention mode, we move them into some kind of alerting or simulation mode. So at that point, we basically say, hey, we are confident that this account is only doing what we learned, but because, we want to give you comfort, we're first going to move it to a phase where it's not actually going to block anything, but it's going to alert you, if there's any deviation that surprised us. If let's say that we think that this account is only used to connect from these 5 systems to these 10 systems, and we learned this over 2 months, and we're very confident because it's very, very repetitive. And we're going to give it another month where we're not preventing anything yet, but we're going to alert you if there was any other use of this account that was outside of this. And this gives you comfort, because at that period of time, you're going to see that there's no false positives, there's no alerts, there's nothing that actually happened that would have been prevented. And at that point, organizations feel more comfortable. And also, I think they realize that if there will be anything that goes outside of this, it's suspicious enough at this point to at least pause and ask, what is this? Why is it happening? So, by the way, one of the things we do is, for every one of these accounts, we are able to recommend or kind of map, through different integrations, who's the owner of that account. And that's really useful, because we can say, okay, we think that this account is only doing this, but if it's going to do anything else, we're going to reach out to the owner of this account and ask, is this expected? Like, we're seeing this account being used in this new place. Is this something that you know about? And that allows for some feedback. So now This also builds trust because they know that those application owners are going to be able to provide feedback and say, oh yeah, my account actually does need to run in this additional place because I just, did this change. And once this, and by the way, at this point, we didn't prevent anything yet. We were still in alerting mode. At that point, when they see that this whole flow works, they'll feel comfortable enough moving it to prevention. But that really took a lot of investment in understanding, how organizations want to operationalize this, what other IT system they're using that we need to integrate with to make it, more visible to them. It's really, I think anyone outside of the identity market cannot fully appreciate like how complex the changes are. That I think, you guys know well. I've talked to one company where, before implementing Silverfort, they were trying to do some of this manually and finding these accounts and trying to rotate their passwords. And they told me it would take sometimes 6 months to get approval to make a change to a service account. And by the time they got the approval, this service account maybe was already decommissioned or was outside of the scope of the audit, or the audit already happened, like all kinds of things that make it so slow that it's almost irrelevant. It's really a feeling of you're walking and making no progress. And I think that's not only a problem in non-human identities, it's a problem in identity in general, but in non-human identities, it's even more of a problem because there's no person to ask sometimes, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? You need to guess if you don't have this visibility.
So speaking of non-persons, I think that's probably a great segue to get into talking about some of the new things you've announced around AI agent security, because you talked about that mapping of like, okay, who does the account belong to? It's approaching probably sooner than we think, where we have AIs talking to AIs, talking to AIs, talking to AIs. And you have like this Inception or Mastroika doll where you've got so many different layers of, bots talking to bots, and maybe there's a human in the mix somewhere. But I want to talk about this new feature or this new capability that you guys have brought out around AI agent security. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's this is a very exciting space that is obviously moving faster than anything else that we've been talking about. Other areas of identity security are moving fast, but nothing is even close to this. This problem is changing and evolving, every day, and I think it's going to become a huge problem for organizations very soon, if not already. So, just an explanation for anyone listening to this who doesn't fully understand what are those AI agents and why is it such a new and different problem? Why is it so different than detecting regular identities or NHIs? So, AI agents are basically, as opposed to chatbot, AI agents are actually doing things. They're logging into your systems and they can take actions. They can write an email. They can, change something in your CRM. It can, build an application. It can actually do things. And this has massive potential for helping businesses because you can actually automate a lot of work that was done by people, manual work. You can use these agents almost as virtual workforce or virtual assistants that do things that were just a lot of manual effort for people. But it also creates a huge security risk because the risk of using a regular good old ChatGPT are at the worst case you get the wrong answer, right? So it's there is a risk there, right, with his hallucinations and things like that, but it's going to do anything bad. Agents can actually do stuff. So it can delete your data accidentally, or it can send an email that makes you look really bad or cause an issue for your company. Or it can do all kinds of things that can cause real damage. And unlike regular non-human identities, and this is where we're starting to get into the differences, they're much less predictable. With a regular non-human identity, we just talked about, I can learn that it's connecting from A to B every morning at 9 a.m. And I kind of learned that very, very simple, repetitive pattern because it's just a script. An AI agent, because it's based on AI, on LLMs, it's not deterministic. It can do a different thing every day. It can suddenly decide to do something new today that is a little different than yesterday. So it's harder to tell, is it doing something that it should? At the same time, it's not a human, so you can't use the regular stuff, the security controls that work for human, like multi-factor authentication, right? The stuff that we got used to do for humans. So it's not a human, it's not a classic NHI, it's something in between, and it takes a new approach to how do we secure these. I think that this is a very important problem because the adoption of AI, and especially AI agents, is going to have so much benefits for the business that companies are going to adopt it whether we, the security people, are ready or not. I think that, over the next months, boards and CEOs will be coming to those security leaders and saying, we're going to adopt AI because otherwise our competitors take us out of business. Like, we're not going to be competitive. So we're going to implement it. You should do your best to secure it, but we're not waiting. And I think that this makes it an urgent problem, although it looks like it's so new and so emerging, and it feels like you can wait and see where it goes. I think that it is going to become very urgent very soon. So now let me tell you our approach to it. So we figured in order to make this safe, to make AI agents operate in my network and know that I limit them from causing any damage, I need to have visibility to what they do. And I need to be able to stop them from doing things they shouldn't do. The first part is easier. So giving you visibility to what they do, I think that every vendor that is in the non-human identity space is going to be able to do that. Because at the end of the day, these are non-human identities and, we can see what they're doing. There are other vendors that can also see what they're doing by looking at the logs and looking at, the configurations and things like that, and show you, you have this AI agent and it's using this identity and it's accessing this system. I mean, it's not super easy, but vendors are figuring it out and companies are figuring it out. The second part is more complex. How do you actually prevent it from doing bad things? This requires an inline approach. And what I mean by that is we need to actually get the AI agents when they access things. So when they connect to your email server or to your customer database, we need to be inline as a gateway on this communication in order to really be able to stop bad things. Now, luckily, there are ways to do that technically. For example, I don't know if you heard about, obviously, like a lot of people are talking now about how AI agents are accessing other systems, and the buzzword right now is MCP, right? MCP is kind of the language, the protocol in which AI agents are connecting to other systems. It's very cool. It allows you to save the need to integrate individually with every system, and the advantage of that is that you can actually create an MCP gateway, which means that when an AI agent is trying to connect to different systems and applications, it will do it through your solution, through Silverfort in this case. This means that we are actually in line on what it's trying to do. And it means that if we're seeing it doing something bad, we can block it, or we can involve a human, This is, by the way, a new kind of concept, but think about the AI agent is doing something bad. I go to the owner of this agent and I ask it, hey, is it okay that your AI agent is trying to do this? And the human says, yes, that actually makes sense to me. And then we can allow it. So there's a lot of things you can do there. By the way, it's not just a new problem. There's also new opportunities here. You can actually use AI to be able to do that. You know what you said before, you left, but that actually is true. Like, it's all kind of connected. So in order to look at what AI is doing and figure out if it makes sense, you can actually leverage AI. And also there's new opportunities with interacting with the AI agent. For example, with a regular non-human identity that is trying to do something, I can't ask it why are you doing it? But with an AI agent, maybe I can. Maybe I can ask the AI agent, hey, why are you accessing the customer database? And the AI agent will actually tell me, why is he trying to do that? So there's a lot of new opportunities here. There's a lot of, new challenges, new opportunities. Everything is moving super fast. But the product we just released is exactly that. It's a gateway that sees all these agents trying to do things. It can show you what they're doing. It can control what they're allowed to do. So like granular authorization, we can say, yes, it can access Slack, but it shouldn't be able to write anything, or it shouldn't be able to read any of these groups. So you can really control the granular access permissions you give it. It can block certain things. It can involve more security controls if we think it's doing something bad. It's really a very cool answer to this concern that is super new. But I think without solving it, organizations will not be able to really enjoy this revolution. So I think it's going to be.
So I think that's really clever the way you're approaching with that gateway type approach, and things like MCP or Model Context Protocol or A2A, which is agent to agent. There's a lot of work being done to facilitate data transferring right between models and between agents itself. I'm curious if you have an opinion on, from an identity standpoint, how should we be thinking about security for this? Is it very specific fine-tune agents that only have access to the things they need to, which means more agents, or something that's a little bit broader from an agent perspective that maybe does have more access to different things and have fewer agents? So is it a quantity versus quality thing? Like, what are you thinking like from an identity security standpoint?
I think that at first, at least, we probably are going to see many agents doing small things, right? And kind of orchestrating each other and telling each other what to do. But it's really an army of agents that is trying to do a combination of many small things in order to accomplish one big thing. That also simplifies things a little from a security perspective, because I can figure out what each of these agents is exactly trying to do. And I can understand, who owns each of these pieces. If you imagine one agent that is super intelligent, can do all of it, then it's also really hard to secure it, because I don't know what it's trying. It might do this today and this tomorrow. And, does it even have an owner? Because if it's doing everything, then who is the person who really owns it? So it makes things a little harder. I think in the long term, this is where it actually might go, because, AI will become smarter, and, we won't need to break it all these tiny pieces. It will just have, much better capabilities, and it will be able to take action, and will actually want to give it more flexibility. But that will have some trade-off with security, with our ability to control it. I think at least for now, while we still don't know how this is going to work, we understand some of the risk, but definitely not all the risk. I think it's important that we stay really structured, right? And I think that's what organizations mostly are doing, because that's also, the limitations of the current AI models. They're breaking it down to small things, and we can tell that, this piece is in charge only on, writing stuff into your CRM, and it's owned by this person from sales operations, and it's only connecting from here to there and doing this. And this actually makes things, much more controlled from a security perspective. So I think at least for the short term, that's what we mainly are going to see. And by the way, I think that connection of every agent to a human owner is actually very important, because it means that you have someone accountable for what it's doing.
Yeah, it seems like the agent acts in the context of the person who is making the requests, or I'm not sure if the request is the right word, but depending on what the agent does, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, does the agent run under a service account, or does it leverage the context and authentication of the person, not only the authentication, but also the authorization, the entitlements that person has, and via the MCP server, maybe MCP server says, oh, here's Jim McDonald asking to access, the customer database, to use your example.
Yeah.
That to me seems like that's the right level of security.
I think that is probably the easiest approach because, if it's running on behalf of Jim, then it's going to have Jim's permissions. I don't think that's the safest approach because it might not need all of Jim's permissions, because it's doing something specific. Why give it all the permissions that Jim has? I think that that's where a lot of people started because it was easy. I think that what vendors like us are doing now is offering, more granular controls, so really least privilege approach, where we say, yes, it's acting on behalf of Jim, but it only really needs to do this one thing. So, let's only give it this permission. Let's not give it all the permissions Jim has, which is harder to do, but that's what vendors like us are here for, in order to automate this and figure it out more automatically. I don't think that's something that an organization can figure out on their own at scale. But just like we've done that for service accounts and for non-human identities in the cloud, now we're doing this for NHIs because we have already some expertise in this. We can see all these agents, we can understand what they're doing, we can understand who is their owner, we can understand, do they really need those full permissions, or based on what they're doing, maybe they only need a much smaller set of permissions, and then we can automatically start recommending to you, where you can actually minimize that. So all of that, I think is very important, very urgent, because before we know it, our companies are going to be full of agents. I mean, we're already seeing it at Silverfort, even internally. I'm sure many organizations are starting to see it, and if not, they should actually be even more concerned. I think that, they need to. And I think that this level of control is the only thing that will allow organizations to have the trust and the confidence to do it. So in a way, it's an enabler for AI adoption. If we don't figure out the security aspects, then organizations are not going to be able to adopt this fully, or under competitive pressure, they're going to adopt it without security, and it's going to be a mess. So we do need to figure it out, and I think that starting from the permissions of the person who's running the agent is a good start, but it has to be more narrow than that.
I think this kind of highlights the urgency and sort of the issue with all these different agents. I can certainly see an angle where, in this example that Jim pointed out there of acting in the context of something, and you're totally right. We don't want to give the thing too much information or too much permission. So I can see one agent, saying, okay, here's what I need to do. Another agent saying, okay, well, what does that actually mean? And then another agent that says, let me interrogate Jim's entitlements. And then some other agent that says, okay, based on these entitlements and based on what you're trying to do, let me down select the specific authorizations, and then passing that back through the chain, all the way back to the first agent to actually do the work.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And then it can even become more sophisticated. I'll give you an example of something we're building now. We've had for years session recording, right, as part of privilege access management, right? People have been doing session recording. They recorded what the admin is doing inside the session, and then it was sent to be buried somewhere and nobody ever watched it, right? But we did that because we needed to have some evidence of what the person did. AI actually presents an amazing opportunity to use this kind of data, because you can actually have AI watch it and figure out, what is it doing? Is it actually aligned with what this person was supposed to do? Now, think about this as in the context of AI protecting AI. You could have an AI agent saying, I need to log into the CRM because I need to do something. I need to update this record. And then you can actually watch what it's doing. I mean, another AI agent can watch what it's doing and compare that to what the agent said is going to do. So if the agent was going there to update this record, did it actually update the record, or did it do something else? You can apply that, of course, you can apply that to humans too. But there's just so much new opportunity to automate things that were impossible to do because the manual work needed was unreasonable. And now that there's AI, we can actually do that. We can actually watch all these hours of session recordings and compare them to what people were supposed to do and what they said they're going to do in their ticket. And we can automatically figure out who is doing something bad and block it in real time. So, I think security is actually going to get way more sophisticated because we can finally automate all these things that were always, not feasible. And that is actually going to help us protect AI too. And by the way, I think that is critical because with AI, protection has to be automated. It has to be fast because AI itself is operating very fast. So think about the way we secured human was always assuming that they move at human speed. So I could detect the bad behavior, send an alert, and somebody at the SOC would look at the alert and investigate it and then go back and do something about it. And all of it was assuming that it's a human attacker moving at human speed. With AI-based attacks, it's going to happen in seconds because all the decisions are automated and AI is making them. So taking over a corporate network, breaching a corporate network could take a few seconds if all of this is automated. This means that if we don't make those security decisions inline in real time and we don't block these things while they're happening, we're too late. If we're just sending some alerts to the SOC waiting for anyone to look at them, the attack already happened. So I think AI speed is actually the only way we can protect against AI threats.
So Hed, you've already given us like 12 minutes more than we asked for. And I didn't want to, neither Jeff or I wanted to stop you along the way because we're learning so much. I mean, it's been an absolutely great session. So can you just give me 2 more minutes? There's one more question I wanted to ask you, which was around this ideal identity security playbook that you guys have crafted. An ideal is an acronym. It stands for integrate, discover, enforce, analyze, and lightweight. So can you give us an idea of like how this gets used? Why is it useful for the practitioner? And then Jeff will take us out.
Yeah, I'll keep it very short. I think that it kind of summarizes a lot of what we talked about. So I talked about Silverfort's approach to identity security, right? We're doing it really as a very broad platform. We want to tackle all these things like humans and non-humans and AI and on-prem and cloud. And to summarize this approach, with a playbook that I think organizations can use to understand what does it take to really deliver holistic identity security, you can really use this ideal concept. So it starts from integrate, which means in order to really bring identity security everywhere, I need to integrate with all the pieces of my identity infrastructure, all the way from the legacy to the modern cloud IDPs, right? AD, Entra, Okta, Google, AWS, all of these different pieces, including the SaaS applications or legacy applications that have local identities. So integrate is the first piece because I need to see everything. The second piece is discover. Once I'm connected to all of these pieces, I need to discover all the entities, all the identities, all the non-human identities, all the privileges, the group memberships, everything that I can get. The third step is enforce. That is also probably the step that is the most unique to Silverfort. Many vendors do the first 2 steps and they just give you that visibility and then, you need to do something with that. We need to figure out how to address these issues. We also believe that the critical element of this is enforce. Once we see what's going on and we see some bad things, we need to be able to intervene. We need to be able to prevent certain activity. We need to be able to authenticate certain users as they're trying to do something. We need to be able to have real-time controls. And that requires an inline architecture. Means that you need to actually see the access requests going through in a way that you're able to stop them if you need to. Step number 4 is analyze, because all of this data and activities and people authenticating and all these different data sources you get, you need to have intelligence around, and that's part of what we just talked about with analyzing. What did it actually do compared to what it was supposed to do? And, does this look like normal behavior or not? Does this look like lateral movement? Does this, you need to bring intelligence into this. And then the last part is lightweight. And the reason why we believe that's so crucial is because identity projects historically have been way too complex for most organizations to survive. A lot of people joke that, there's no point starting an identity project because it's going to be the next person after me that is going to actually get to finish it and get the credit. So I think we have to make identity security easier. Otherwise, we're limiting it to a very small number of companies in the world that have the ability to execute. And the rest of the companies are just, listening to these type of podcasts and wishing they had these things, but they can't really implement them effectively. So it has to be lightweight. It has to be simple. It has to be quick. I think that if you look at other categories of security, again, the vendors that really were able to bring innovation and conquer those markets were not just the ones who did it in the most secure way, but the ones who made it easy, made it super simple to implement and to use. And I think it's time for identity to set this as a requirement also. Identity, people deserve to have products that are not a nightmare to implement. Otherwise, they're just wasting time and money and they're not going to get the result. So that's basically the approach, and it kind of summarizes, everything we said before and kind of how we believe identity security should be done. And yeah, whether people do it with us or not, I think that's what they need to aim for.
I think I don't know how we top that. And so I think that's probably a good spot where we close it. You guys are doing such cool work, and congrats on the success. We're going to have a bunch of links in our show notes, but definitely want to encourage people to go to silverfort.com and check things out. I was taking notes as we were kind of talking here. There'll be a link to the Insecurity in the Shadows report that we talked about. There'll be a link to the Identity Security Playbook as well. And then we'll also have a link in our show notes for people to connect on LinkedIn as well as ourselves. So Head, it's always a great pleasure talking with you. And I really appreciate you taking the time with us. If I took one thing away from this conversation, you kept mentioning the word inline. It's like, okay, like that is what we need to get people to understand. It's like you need to be injected into the process, into the data stream, into whatever you want to call it, and be, well, as you said, inline.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Otherwise, we're just pointing out issues without being able to actually solve them or stop them. Yeah,
well. There's value in at least pointing the issue out, but we've got to start solving these problems. So I appreciate the discussion, especially when you say we need to make identity security easier. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Nobody wants hard tools. We've got to have a way to approach this. And I like what you guys are doing. So
thank you.
So this is a good spot. We're going to have to leave it for this week. Thanks everyone for watching and or listening. You can find us on the web at idacpodcast.com, and we'll talk with everyone in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.